Hello, this is David Taylor Klaus, and welcome to Mindset Mondays with DTK. This is episode number 41 in a year-long program of weekly Facebook Live broadcast. This is designed for folks with a growth mindset or the folks who'd like to develop one, a chance to play with new ideas, new concepts, and try on new mindsets. So before we get started today, if you'll take a quick moment to click share and add your friends, your community, your world to the conversation, give them a chance to play along. All right, so why are we here? This is I shudder to think this is a fun quote. It follows along with last week. This one is, listen to what you know instead of what you fear. A classic from Richard Bach, and wow, this one really landed for me. I started to think about how debilitating the fear can be, and how easy the idea of listening instead to what you know, and how we can make these platitudes and these recommendations and these strategies sound so simple and so easy, and they can be soul-crushingly hard. Because listening to the fear, listening to those voices, listening to that inner chatter is so easy. That default is so easy. And we played with this last week. Somebody offered up the idea that fear is an acronym for false emotions appearing real, or false evidence appearing real, even false expectations appearing real. There's so many ways that people have twisted on it. I actually looked a couple up, and some were kind of positive. Forget everything and relax, or even face everything and recover, face everything and rejoice. I like the one, forget everything and remember. Forget the fear narrative, forget that internal dialogue, the chatter from the saboteurs, and remember what's true. I think for me, when I started training to be a coach in 2008, I thought that I was doing it with the design of launching a Vistage practice. Joining Vistage International, I've been a member now for 15 years, and I'm a Vistage speaker, but I also looked at becoming a Vistage chair, and I wanted to know how to coach, because I felt like adding coaching to the mentoring and the consulting and the thinking partner role that a chair plays would really deepen the experience for me and for the members. And so that was the plan. Or at least that's what I told myself. As I got into the coach training, I always tell the story of calling home that first break, and much like Elaine had a year before, going, oh my God, I found it. And it was adding structure and language and to the way it felt like my brain already worked. And when I chose a year and a half later to make that my full-time practice, when I sold my share of the company at that time to my partner, and I started coaching full-time, I remember walking back into my Vistage meeting for the first time. And all the members knew what was happening and what I was doing and what I had been working on with my partner and leaving the business. And they had been there all the way along the way. And yet, walking into that room, I was terrified. I had left a real business and I was becoming a coach. I wasn't in, not that I've ever really been in corporate, but I wasn't in that formal business structure. I was becoming a coach, and I knew, and I still know what so many people think coaching is. They hear coach, they go, oh, life coach? With that face. And people have all kinds of made up impressions of what it is. And this is not a conversation about dispelling those rumors. This is, I walked into that room and I was terrified because I felt like I had stepped out of that structured business world and I was no longer relevant. And I still even have twinges of that now. The fear of being or becoming or being seen as irrelevant. That was the fear. I wasn't listening to what I know. I was giving over to the fear. And it made it hard for me to engage. And there's nothing like sitting in a room for an entire day with people who know you and see you and trying desperately to hide in plain sight. I wasn't hiding from them. I was hiding from me. I wasn't willing to sit with that fear. I wasn't willing to be honest with it. I sure as hell wasn't going to say anything out loud. I was terrified. It's like, well, I'm going to go out in the world. And part of me is, standing tall with sword and shield, going out to declare what it was that I was doing and continue to make the difference that I had been making for already over a year, and to keep having that impact and expanding that. And instead, I sat in the room and I just wanted to shrink. I mean, how many times do we do that? How many times do we give in to the fear, the made up truth, future events already ruined, right? How often do we give in to the fear instead of listening to what we know? What I know how much of a difference coaching makes. I've been a client, and by the way, never hire a coach who doesn't have a coach, right? We should all, I believe, as coaches, be leaning into that work, because we do this work on ourselves so we can do this work in the world. So I had always had a coach since the beginning of my practice. And at that point, I was still standing there, knowing full well the impact of coaching on being on the receiving end and being on the giving end. And still wanted to hide. I was afraid of being irrelevant. And I know from my experience that people feel their own flavor of that across the board. People experience their own fear of being irrelevant or not important or not good enough, or the imposter syndrome comes in. And that's true across all walks of life and all industries. And yet, damn, then I got into the beating myself up for, well, I'm a coach, I shouldn't think like that. I shouldn't succumb to that fear. I should have fixed that. Yeah, nice thought. And any of the coaches that are listening to this or will listen to this, it's amazing how many of us executive coaches who've left corporate and go back in as a coach, and I've heard the same stories. Holy crap. But what happens when we listen to what we know instead? What happens if we lean into what we know? We lean into the truth. And look, those internal dialogues, I know the difference. And we all do. We know the difference between when the saboteur screams in our ear, when that internal negative dialogue, and when we're hearing the truth, when we're listening to our higher self, or for those who believe in that divine download, we know when it's a true voice or the lie. But does that mean we listen? Does that mean we choose which one to listen to? God knows why we put so much effort into listening to that negative. Yeah, we do. What happens when you listen to that true voice? What happens when you listen to what you know? How does your world change when you listen to that true voice, your truth, your inner sage? What's different for you? What becomes possible when you stop listening to the fear and you listen to what you know instead of what you fear? For me, that's where the grace is. For me, that's where expansion is. For me, that's where the space is. That open space where you have time to breathe. There's an article that was speaking to an op-ed piece that Martin Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania just wrote. And he talks about the idea that humans, we are time travelers. Calls us Homo prospectus. We, in our default state, when we sit still without a screen or without noise, when we sit quietly, they were doing research and they wanted to give folk the opportunity to sit still. And they looked at the brain activity while they were sitting still doing nothing, and then looked at the brain activity when they were under task. What they noticed was the brain in default state, when they were given nothing to think about, was incredibly active. And as they turned the research, and they flipped the research over and started researching that default state network, what's fascinating is when left to our own devices, we'll replay things that happened in the past, or we'll project into the future and plot out all the potential cause and effects and impacts. We time travel. And in any given few minute stretch, we can be thinking about what happened earlier or 5 years ago or when we were a kid, and we can be thinking about what could happen in the future. And Homo prospectus, in projecting ourselves into the future, we are constantly thinking about our prospects. Kind of a cool idea. So what if we took the positive play on that? What if we projected forward and planned and looked at possibility? What if we left the negative voice in the present where it only ever exists, and projected ourselves and played out the future, listening to what's possible or what we want to create? Neil, yes, Neil, it's too easy to pile on the negatives. Absolutely. It's a self-feeding loop, right? Giving in to the negative is easier. However, that's only because that's what the neural pathways that we have reinforced over and over and over and over again. The opportunity is to change that pattern through choice, choosing the neural pathway we want to play with, that we want to stay on, that we want to reinforce. Choosing, instead of listening to the fear, to listen to what we know. For me, it's knowing the impact that I can have, and that I do have, and that I will continue to have as a parent, as a partner, as a coach, as a human, and to remember that and to listen to that voice and that truth. There is so much more energy and momentum available there than listening to the fear, which just is constricting and constraining. The opportunity to co-create looking forward. There's a great word I heard, pronoia. It's the opposite of paranoia. Pronoia is the belief that the universe is conspiring in your favor. Why not? What if that's the truth that you hold on to? The opportunity is ours to create. And it starts with the choice we make about the voice we listen to. Right? Just because we hear that internal dialogue doesn't make it true. Test it. Choose the voice that you want to listen to. What if you chose to listen to what you know? To listen to that truth? You know, Thanksgiving is just a couple days away, and we're all likely to be surrounded by family. And for some, that's an incredibly positive experience. For some, it's challenging, and for some, it's both. You know what? Be thankful that you have a choice in the voice that you listen to. Listen to what you know. Listen to what's true. I am thankful that I have that choice. I am thankful that I have the opportunity to choose one mindset over another, one internal dialogue over another. And thank goodness. Because that means that I get to choose the future I want. We all have the opportunity to choose the future we want. So for this week, and may you, for those in the States celebrating it, have a phenomenal Thanksgiving and choose a mindset that serves as you walk into time with family. So for this week, what mindset will you choose?